My name is Emily Carter. I'm 35 years old, living in Seattle, Washington, with my daughter Amelia. She's 11 now. I'm telling you this story because people love to say family is everything. I used to believe that. I believed it so hard I built my whole life around it. But 3 years ago, on a freezing day in early December 2022, I learned the truth. Some people don't love you. They love the version of you that is useful. And when you stop being useful, they don't just let you fall. They help push. Let me take you back. It happened on Amelia's 8th birthday. My parents dragged her out of their house and left her on the porch with 3 suitcases, everything we owned, because I was 5 days late on rent. That's what they told the police anyway. But the rent was just a receipt they waved around to make themselves look justified. The real reason was uglier, and it had my sister's name all over it. Before I get to that day, before I get to the cold and the sirens, and the way my daughter's lips trembled when she asked me if I was going to leave her too, you need to understand how I ended up living in my parents' house in the first place. Because my life didn't start out like that. Years before the pandemic, I had what people call a good life. I owned a small company that designed and manufactured high-end wooden furniture, custom pieces, the kind you'd see staged in million-dollar homes. I had almost 10 employees, a workshop that always smelled like fresh-cut cedar, and a waiting list that made me feel proud instead of afraid. Back then, Amelia was a giggly little thing with messy hair and sticky hands. We lived in a 2-story house in Ballard. There was a reliable car in the garage. We took one vacation a year, not fancy, but happy. And my family, my extended family, felt solid. My parents, Thomas and Brenda, invited us for dinner almost every weekend. My mother would pinch Amelia's cheeks and call her my little angel. My father would pretend he wasn't soft, but he always had candy in his pocket for her. My sister Ashley and her husband Oliver would come too, bringing their son Liam. Holidays were loud, warm, familiar. We took pictures. We laughed. We looked like one of those families you'd assume would stick together when things got hard. And I tried to be the kind of daughter and sister who made it easy to love me. When Ashley and Oliver needed capital for their business, I lent them $15,000. No interest, no contract, just trust. When my parents wanted to fix their roof, I paid the entire $8,000 without hesitation. There were other smaller things too: repairs, groceries, help with bills, little rescues that added up to a pattern. At the time, I told myself I was building something bigger than money. Money comes and goes, I used to say. Family is forever. I really believed that what I gave them would come back to me as loyalty. I believed that if I ever fell, they'd reach for me. I didn't understand that some people don't reach down. They check whether you're worth the effort first. Everything started collapsing in early 2020, when the pandemic hit Seattle like a storm that didn't know when to stop. Lockdown orders came. Businesses shut down. Clients stopped calling. Then they started canceling. I tried to keep the company alive by cutting costs, laying off employees, and not paying myself. But without revenue, it didn't matter how hard I worked. The debts kept stacking. Bank loans, rent for the workshop, supplier bills. Every month felt like holding my breath underwater and praying the surface would come back to me. By June 2021, after more than a year of struggling, I was forced to shut down. I still remember turning the key in the workshop door for the last time. The sound of that lock clicking felt like something snapping inside my chest. And the worst part? I wasn't just closing a business. I was admitting I'd failed. I owed almost $1 million in loans and costs. The number didn't even feel real. It felt like a monster sitting on my shoulders, whispering that I'd never stand up again. That pressure didn't stay in the bank statements. It seeped into my home. It seeped into my relationship. At that time, Amelia and I lived with my boyfriend, Mason Hale. He wasn't her biological father, but for years he'd been the one reading bedtime stories and reminding her to brush her teeth. He called her kiddo. She called him Mace. When things were good, Mason used to talk about the future like it was guaranteed. But when things got bad, the future became something he avoided looking at. We started arguing about everything: money, groceries, bills, the house, the way I stared at my phone like it might explode. I'd come home exhausted from job interviews and side gigs, and he'd be quiet in that way that felt like judgment. One evening in October 2021, I came home after another day at a new job, one that paid a fraction of what I used to make, and I found a note on the kitchen table. It was Mason's handwriting, but the words were cold enough to make me feel like the room had lost heat. Emily, I can't do this anymore. I tried, but I can't live like this. I'm sorry, but I have to go. Don't look for me. For a second, my brain refused to process it. Because who leaves a person they love with a note? Who walks out of a home where a child sleeps? I ran upstairs. His closet was empty. His drawers were empty. Even the stupid little things, the cologne I hated, the cheap charger he always stole from me, were gone. He didn't just leave me. He left Amelia. And Amelia was only 7. She didn't understand why Mason disappeared. Every night she asked me when he was coming back. She cried like grief was something too big for her small body. And every time I saw her eyes go red, I felt something inside me tear. I was drowning in debt, working a low-paying job, and trying to hold my daughter together with one hand, while my other hand tried to keep us afloat. By January 2022, I made the most painful decision of my life. I sold our house. The house wasn't just wood and paint. It was the place Amelia learned to walk. The place we marked her height on the doorframe. The place I thought we'd grow old in. I told myself selling it would end the pain. I was wrong. After paying off what I could, I had about $4,000 left. And 3 suitcases. That's it. One afternoon in late January, I drove to my parents' house with Amelia in the passenger seat, hugging her favorite teddy bear. She didn't know what we were doing. She just knew I was quiet in that way that meant she should be quiet too. When I rang the doorbell, my heart pounded like I was about to be sentenced. I had practiced what I would say during the entire drive, but when the door opened and I saw my mother's face, Brenda, every rehearsed word disappeared. Her eyes flicked past me to the car, to the suitcases. She didn't even ask why. Her voice was flat. "What are you doing here?" My throat tightened. I sold the house. I need a place to stay temporarily." She didn't invite us in. She stood there like the doorway was a border and I was asking for asylum. Then she turned her head and called inside. "Thomas, Emily's here." My father appeared behind her. His face didn't soften when he saw Amelia. If anything, his eyes sharpened. He didn't say hello. He said, "What do you want?" Humiliation rose hot in my chest. I lowered my head anyway. "I lost the house," I whispered. "I just need somewhere temporary, until I can get back on my feet." My father was silent, looking me up and down like he was deciding whether I was worth the inconvenience. Then he said, "Fine, you can stay, but one condition." Hope flared in me so fast it almost hurt. "What condition?" I asked quickly. He looked me dead in the eyes. $1,200 a month for rent and living expenses. You and Amelia handle your own food. You pay on the first day of every month. No exceptions. I froze. Found 200. To live in the house I grew up in. To sleep in my childhood home like a stranger with a lease. My mother finally spoke, still not warm. "If you don't agree, we can't help." At that moment, I had no power, no pride left that could buy me shelter. So I nodded, and the door opened wider. But somehow, it didn't feel like being welcomed. It felt like being admitted. My mother pointed upstairs. "Last room on the right. That's the only room you can use." I took Amelia's hand and carried the suitcases upstairs, step by step, feeling shame press heavier than the luggage. The room wasn't really a bedroom. It used to be storage. An old bed, a tiny closet, a window facing the backyard like it was trying to look away. That night, Amelia curled against me and whispered, "Mommy, are we safe here?" I kissed her forehead and lied with a smile. "Yes, baby, we're safe." But deep down, something in me already knew. Safety isn't a roof. Safety is love. And in that house, love came with conditions. The first week at my parents' house, I moved like a guest who didn't trust the floorboards. I kept my voice low. I cleaned up every crumb. I folded our clothes so neatly it looked like we weren't even living there, like if I made myself small enough, I wouldn't trigger their annoyance. Amelia tried too. She was 7, but she could read a room better than most adults. She stopped running down the hallway. She stopped laughing loudly at cartoons. When she wanted a snack, she'd whisper to me first, like the kitchen was a stranger's office we had to ask permission to enter. That should have broken something in my parents. It didn't. It was like they'd already decided who we were in their house. Not family. Tenants. And tenants follow rules. The room they gave us, our room, stayed cold no matter how high I turned the heat vent. Some nights I'd wake up and see Amelia curled in a tight ball, hugging her teddy bear like it could absorb fear. I'd pull her closer and stare at the ceiling in the dark, listening to the quiet creaks of the house. That house had held my childhood. It should have felt familiar. Instead, it felt like I was living in someone else's story, one where the main character is tolerated, not loved. I started job hunting the next morning. I told myself this is temporary. I told myself, work hard, save, get out. With my background, business management, client relationships, running payroll, and production schedules. I expected I'd find something decent, at least enough to rent a small place. But the pandemic had changed everything. Positions were limited, competition was brutal. People with perfect resumes were suddenly taking jobs they would have laughed at 2 years ago. 2 weeks of applications, interviews that felt like polite rejections, emails that started with, "We appreciate your time," and ended with nothing. Finally, I received an offer from a property management company, assistant manager, $45 a month before taxes. After taxes, about $35. It wasn't the life I used to live, but it was stability. It was a ladder, and I was clinging to anything that could lift Amelia and me out of that house. The routine set in fast. Every morning, I woke up early to make Amelia breakfast, usually oatmeal or toast because it was cheap, and it wouldn't leave a mess my mother could complain about. I got her dressed, brushed her hair, walked her out to the car, drove her to school. Then I drove to work, shoulders tight, jaw clenched, pretending I wasn't constantly calculating money in my head. In the evenings, I picked Amelia up, went home, cooked dinner in the kitchen my parents allowed us to use, and cleaned until the counters gleamed. My mother would stand in the doorway sometimes, arms crossed, eyes scanning for any proof I'd violated her standards. "No dishes left in the sink," she'd remind me, even if I'd already washed everything. "No noise after 9, she'd say, even if Amelia was just quietly coloring. "Don't leave your shoes in the hallway," she'd snap, as if my shoes were a threat to the order of her life. And every month, on the first day, I handed my father an envelope of cash. 200. Always cash, always exact. He never said thank you. He'd just take it like it was owed, and maybe, in his mind, it was. Like being his daughter didn't matter anymore, like my name could have been anyone's. Sometimes, when I walked back upstairs after paying rent, I'd catch my reflection in the hallway mirror, and I barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were dull, her face looked tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. That woman looked like she was living under someone's permission. The worst part wasn't even the rules. It was how differently they treated Ashley. Ashley would show up every couple of weeks, usually in a nice coat, her hair perfectly done, smelling like expensive perfume. She'd bring gifts for my parents, fancy tea, a new scarf, sometimes a bottle of wine for my dad. My parents would light up the moment they heard her voice. My mother's tone would soften. My father would smile, actually smile, like a warm version of him still existed, just not for me. Ashley would sit at the kitchen table and talk about her business, about how busy she was, how much Liam was excelling in school. My parents ate it up like it was proof they'd raised at least one success. And I would sit quietly, my hands around a mug of cheap coffee, feeling like a shadow. Ashley would glance at me sometimes, her eyes skimming over my clothes, my tired face, the way Amelia clung to my sleeve. But she never said, "How are you holding up?" She never said, "Do you need anything?" Instead, she'd toss out little comments that sounded harmless, but landed like needles. "Wow, Emily," she'd say, looking at Amelia's slightly scuffed shoes. "Kids grow fast, huh? Always something to buy." Or, "Must be hard living with mom and dad again. I could never. I need my space." She'd laugh like it was a joke, and my parents would laugh with her. It was a laughter that made me feel smaller than the room. One afternoon, I came home early because Amelia had a mild fever, and the school nurse called me. I carried her upstairs, tucked her into bed, and went back down to make her soup. As I stood near the kitchen doorway, I heard voices. Ashley's voice, my mother's voice. I paused, because something in my mother's tone was different. Sharp, annoyed, like she was speaking about a stranger. Ashley asked, "So, how's Emily doing?" My mother didn't even hesitate. "Don't mention her," she said, exasperated. "Failed in her career. Boyfriend left. Now she has to depend on her parents. It's embarrassing." The words hit me so hard I felt dizzy. Embarrassing. That's what I was to her. Not her daughter. Not a struggling single mother doing everything she could. Just embarrassing. I stood there frozen, my fingers curled into fists so tight my nails cut into my palm. I wanted to walk in and scream. I wanted to demand, where was this disgust when I paid your roof, when I gave Ashley money, when I carried this family on my back? But I didn't, because I was living in their house, because I was paying rent like a tenant, because humiliation is a cage, and I was trapped inside it. I went back upstairs, took one look at Amelia sleeping, and my anger turned into something quieter and more dangerous. Resolve. That night, I opened a notebook and started writing numbers. Income, rent, gas, groceries, Amelia's school expenses. Every dollar I could save. I cut everything that wasn't necessary. No takeout, no new clothes, no small comforts. I packed lunches instead of buying anything at work. I stopped getting coffee in the morning and made it at home, even though it tasted like burnt hope. Every time Amelia asked for something small, stickers, a toy, a treat, I had to decide whether to say no or whether to spend and feel guilty. Sometimes I said yes anyway, because her childhood had already lost too much. But most of the time I promised her later, and she'd nod like she understood. That broke me more than any argument. Months passed, and life became a loop. Wake up, work, clean, pay rent, smile for Amelia, swallow my own pain. By October 2022, I'd saved about $8,000. It wasn't much by Seattle standards, but to me it felt like oxygen. I started quietly browsing rental listings, imagining a small two-bedroom apartment where Amelia could laugh without whispering. A place where I didn't have to ask permission to exist. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Ashley. I kept it to myself like a fragile secret because I had started to understand something. In that house, any sign of hope made people uncomfortable. They didn't want me rising. They wanted me contained. And in hindsight, there were signs. Little moments I didn't recognize at the time. My father watching me count cash at the kitchen table with eyes too focused. My mother asking strange questions like, "So you get paid on the 5th, right?" As if she was confirming a schedule. Ashley visiting more often. Suddenly interested in what room Amelia and I used, how much space we took up. Once I walked past the living room and heard Ashley saying something low to my parents. My mother replied in a quiet, firm voice, "Don't worry, it'll be handled." I didn't stop, I didn't ask. I thought it was about something else. I was always assuming they couldn't be planning anything cruel. Because they were family. Because Amelia was their granddaughter. Because surely there were lines people didn't cross. Then November came. Seattle rain, gray skies, cold that seeped into your bones. One Friday morning near the end of the month, I drove Amelia to school like I always did. She was in the back seat singing a song she'd learned in class, her voice soft and bright, like she didn't know how heavy my world was. I remember smiling at the sound of her. It was one of those rare moments where I let myself believe, we're going to be okay. I had a job. I was saving. Amelia was adapting. Then, disaster found me again. At an intersection near Amelia's school, a pickup truck shot out from the right side so fast I barely had time to react. The screech of brakes, the jolt, the sickening crunch of metal. Amelia screamed. My heart stopped. But she was buckled in. She was safe, shaken, crying, but safe. The damage wasn't catastrophic, but it was enough to ruin everything. Police came, reports were filed. The conclusion was simple. I was at fault. A few days later, I got the notice. $6,600. Repairs, medical for minor injuries, other costs. I stared at the number like it was a death sentence, because I knew exactly what it meant. My $8,000, my escape, my oxygen, was about to vanish. I paid it because I had to. And when I checked my balance afterward, there was about $1,400 left. December 1st was approaching. Rent day. And December 5th, Amelia's birthday. I sat on the edge of our small bed that night, staring at my bank statement. If I paid rent on time, I'd have almost nothing left for food, gas, and living until I got paid. But if I didn't pay, I already knew my parents' answer. No exceptions. I looked over at Amelia sleeping, her teddy bear tucked under her chin. And I whispered to myself so quietly it was barely sound, "Please, not again." But something inside me already felt it, like cold air seeping under a door. The next decision I made would decide whether we stayed, or whether my parents finally got what they secretly wanted. A reason to throw us out. The night I realized I couldn't afford both rent and my daughter's birthday, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling of that tiny room, counting cracks, listening to Amelia's breathing beside me. Every inhale felt like borrowed time. Every exhale felt like guilt. December 1st was 3 days away, rent day, and December 5th, Amelia's birthday, was right behind it, like a fragile promise I was terrified of breaking. I ran the numbers again and again, hoping they'd somehow change. If I paid my parents the $2,200 on time, I'd have about $200 left until my paycheck came in on the 5th. $200 for gas, food, and everything else in between. It wasn't just tight. It was impossible. And worse than that, it would mean nothing for Amelia's birthday. No cake, no gift, no moment of joy in a year that had already taken so much from her. I tried everything before I did the unthinkable. I called loan companies. My credit history, ruined by the business collapse, closed those doors fast. I reached out to a few coworkers carefully, shame burning in my chest with every message. Some apologized, saying they were struggling too. Others didn't reply at all. I even considered selling my laptop until I remembered I needed it for work. By the second night, exhaustion pressed down on me so hard it felt physical. My thoughts were looping, frantic. And then the idea formed. It was small at first, just a whisper. Ask them. Not for forgiveness, not for charity, just for time. 5 days. 5 days until I got paid. I told myself it was reasonable. I told myself this was what family was for. That night, after Amelia fell asleep, I went downstairs. My parents were sitting in the living room watching TV. The glow from the screen cast harsh shadows across their faces. They didn't look at me until I spoke. Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you. My father muted the television slowly, like my words were an interruption, not a concern. What? He asked, annoyed. I stood there, hands clenched so tight my fingers hurt. I had a car accident, I said quietly. I had to pay compensation. Almost all my savings are gone. They didn't react. I swallowed and continued. I'm asking, just this once, if I can pay this month's rent a few days late. I get paid on the 5th. I'll pay you in full immediately. The silence that followed was sharp and heavy. My parents exchanged a look, one I didn't understand at the time. It wasn't shock. It wasn't anger. It was calculation. My father finally spoke. You want to pay rent late? Yes, I said quickly, hope creeping into my voice despite myself. Just a few days. This is the first time I've ever asked. My mother's voice cut through the room, cold and precise. When you moved in, we made the rules very clear. My heart sank. No exceptions, she continued. Pay on the 1st, always. I know, I said, desperation leaking into my tone. But this is different. I had an accident. Amelia's birthday is on the 5th. My father raised his hand, silencing me. No, he said. Rules are rules. Then he leaned forward slightly, eyes hard. If you don't have the money on December 1st, you'll need to find somewhere else to live. The words hit me like a slap. I stood there, frozen, staring at the two people who brought me into this world, who were now threatening to throw me and their granddaughter out over 5 days. 5 days. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg. I wanted to remind them of everything I'd done for this family. But nothing came out. Because something in their eyes told me it wouldn't matter. I turned around and walked upstairs, my legs heavy, my chest tight like it was collapsing inward. Back in the room, Amelia slept peacefully, unaware that her entire world was balancing on a deadline. I sat beside her and brushed her hair back gently. And that was when the most dangerous thought entered my mind. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't throw out an 8-year-old. Not on her birthday. They were strict, cold, harsh. But they weren't monsters, right? I convinced myself my parents were bluffing, that they were trying to scare me into responsibility, that when December 5th came and they saw Amelia's birthday, they'd soften. I told myself this was just tension, just anger, just temporary. So I made a decision, a risky one. I didn't pay the rent on December 1st. Instead, I used the little money I had to keep us going. Groceries, gas, basic necessities. And for the first time in months, I bought something just for Amelia. A small pink bike she'd been pointing at every time we passed the store. It wasn't expensive, about $150, but it felt huge to me. I hid it in my car trunk, covering it with an old blanket like it was something precious. I ordered a small birthday cake from a nearby bakery. Nothing fancy, just chocolate, her favorite. Every night after that, Amelia talked about her birthday. She talked about turning 8, about candles, about wishes. She didn't ask for big things. She just wanted me. And I promised myself, no matter what, I would make that day special. December 1st came and went. That evening, my father called me down to the living room. Where's the rent? He asked flatly. I'll pay on the 5th, I said, my voice steady but my heart pounding. Like I explained. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. Just once. Fine. That was it. No argument, no warning, no anger. And something about that scared me more than if he'd yelled. As I walked back upstairs, I felt it. An unease I couldn't explain. Like the air had shifted, like a decision had already been made, and I wasn't part of it. The next few days were unbearable. My parents barely spoke to me. The house felt heavier, quieter. Even Amelia noticed. Did I do something wrong? She asked one night. I hugged her tightly. No, baby, never. Inside, fear curled tighter around my heart. But still, I believed. I believed December 5th would fix everything. I believed my parents wouldn't cross that line. I believed blood still meant something. I was wrong. December 5th, 2022, started like any other morning. And that's what makes it hurt the most. I woke up at 6 a.m. The sky outside still dark, Seattle cold pressing against the windows. I slipped out of bed quietly so I wouldn't wake Amelia, then stepped back in a few minutes later, crouching beside her. "Hey, birthday girl," I whispered. Her eyes fluttered open, and the moment she remembered, her face lit up like the sun had decided to rise just for her. "Mommy," she gasped, sitting up. "Today's my birthday." I smiled and brushed her hair back, forcing cheer into my voice. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." For a moment, everything felt normal. I made pancakes, the cheap boxed kind, but I shaped them into hearts anyway. Amelia laughed when she saw them, and that laugh almost convinced me I hadn't made a terrible mistake. Her school had a day off for a staff training event, which felt like a small miracle. We had the whole day. I told her my plan. "You're going to stay home with Grandma this morning, okay? I have to work for a bit, but I'll be back at lunch. Then we'll celebrate." She nodded eagerly. "Can we get cake?" I laughed. "Of course." Before leaving, I went downstairs to speak to my mother. She was sitting in the living room reading the newspaper, glasses perched low on her nose. "Mom," I said carefully, "Amelia's off school today. I'll be back at lunch to pick her up. Can you keep an eye on her?" She didn't look up, just nodded. That should have been my warning, but I ignored it. At work, I checked my phone obsessively. At 9 a.m., my paycheck hit my account. $30. Relief flooded me so fast I almost cried right there at my desk. I immediately asked my boss for permission to step out, drove straight to the bank, and withdrew $12,200 in cash, exactly what my parents demanded. I slipped the money into an envelope, smoothing it like it could erase the last few days. I even stopped by the bakery and confirmed the cake order. Everything was going according to plan. I pictured Amelia's face when she saw the bike, the cake, the candles. I let myself smile. Then, at 10:30 a.m., my phone rang. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. "Mrs. Patterson." "Our neighbor." I answered immediately. "Hello?" Her voice came through tight and worried. "Emily, are you home?" "No," I said quickly. "I'm at work. What's wrong?" There was a pause, just long enough for dread to bloom. "You need to come home right now," she said softly. "Amelia is sitting on the front porch with 3 suitcases. She's crying. She's shivering." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "What?" My voice shook. "Why is she outside?" "I don't know," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice breaking. "About an hour ago, I saw your parents bring her out and leave her there. I thought you were coming to pick her up, but she's been alone this whole time." The world tilted. I hung up and immediately called 911. "My daughter is 8 years old," I told the dispatcher, my voice barely holding together. "She's been abandoned outside in freezing weather. Please send help." As I raced out of the office, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my keys. The drive home felt endless. Every red light felt like cruelty. Every second felt stolen. When I turned onto my parents' street, I saw them. An ambulance. A police car. Neighbors gathered on their porches. I slammed my car into park and ran. Amelia was sitting on the porch wrapped in thin clothes, her little body shaking uncontrollably. Paramedics knelt beside her, covering her in warming blankets. "Amelia!" I screamed. She looked up and cried, "Mommy!" I dropped to my knees and wrapped her in my arms, her body icy against mine. One of the paramedics gently pulled me back. "Ma'am, we need to examine her." Her temperature read 95°. Mild hypothermia. My daughter had sat in the cold long enough for her body to start shutting down. While they worked on her, a police officer approached me. "Are you her mother?" "Yes," I said, choking. "That's my daughter." "Who put her outside?" I turned toward the house. "My parents." The officer's expression changed instantly. Paramedics loaded Amelia into the ambulance, and I climbed in beside her, holding her hand as she whispered, "You won't leave me, right?" "Never," I said, tears streaming. "I promise." As the ambulance doors closed, I saw police knocking hard on my parents' door, and in that moment I knew. Whatever was about to happen next, there was no going back. The ambulance ride to the hospital felt unreal. The siren wailed, loud and sharp, but all I could hear was Amelia's breathing, shallow, uneven, fragile. I held her hand the entire way, rubbing warmth back into her fingers as if my skin alone could undo what had been done. She looked at me with glassy eyes and whispered, "Mommy, did Grandma get mad at me?" That question broke something inside me. "No," I said immediately, my voice shaking. "None of this is your fault. Not even a little." At the hospital, doctors rushed her into the emergency room. They wrapped her in more warming blankets, checked her vitals, murmured numbers I couldn't fully process. After what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, a doctor finally turned to me. "She has mild hypothermia," he said. "We intervened in time. She's stable now, but we'll need to monitor her." Relief hit me so hard my knees almost gave out. While Amelia slept under watchful machines and warm lights, I was led into a small waiting room. 2 police officers were already there. One introduced himself as Officer David Martinez. The other, a woman with a calm but serious demeanor, was Officer Jennifer Cole. They asked for my statement, and I told them everything. About the business, about the pandemic, about Mason leaving, about selling the house, about begging my parents for shelter and paying rent like a stranger, about the accident, about asking for 5 days. When I finished, Officer Martinez closed his notebook slowly. "There's something you need to know," he said. My heart dropped. "When we spoke to your parents," he continued, "they admitted they knew you would be paid today. They knew you could pay the rent." I stared at him. "Then why—" Officer Cole spoke next. "They told us they wanted you out of the house as soon as possible." The room felt smaller. "Why?" I asked, even though part of me already sensed the answer. Officer Martinez hesitated. "Your sister Ashley. She's moving back in with her husband and child. Financial trouble. Your parents agreed to take them in." There it was. "They needed the room," Officer Cole added gently. "Yours." My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. So that was it. Not the rent, not the rules, not responsibility. Space. Ashley needed it more than we did. My parents chose her. They chose her family. And they used my daughter's birthday as the exit date. Later that day, a woman from Child Protective Services, Sarah Mitchell, came to speak with me. She listened carefully, her expression growing more serious with every detail. "What your parents did," she said finally, "is considered child endangerment." I nodded, numb. "What happens now?" "There will be an investigation," she said, "and I'll help make sure you and Amelia are safe." And for the first time in a long time, someone meant it. Amelia stayed in the hospital for 3 days. During that time, she barely spoke. She stared out the window like she was somewhere far away, somewhere colder than the room we were in. A child psychologist later told me it was shock. That word still makes my stomach twist. With Sarah's help, I found a small 2-bedroom house in Beacon Hill. Old, simple, but warm. The owners were overseas and willing to rent it cheaply, $1,000 a month, after hearing our story. On the day Amelia was discharged, she asked quietly, "Where are we going now?" I smiled, knelt in front of her, and said, "Home." When she stepped into her new room and realized it was hers, only hers, she cried harder than she had in the hospital. That night, I threw her a late birthday party. 8 candles, chocolate cake, the pink bike I'd hidden for weeks. She hugged me and whispered, "I love you more than anyone." 2 weeks later, my parents went to court. They were charged with endangering a child and abandonment. The evidence was undeniable. Medical reports, neighbor testimony, security footage, their own statements. The judge sentenced them each to 2 years in prison, ordered $50,000 compensation, and issued a restraining order barring them from contacting Amelia until she turned 18. As they were led away, my mother looked at me and whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked at her calmly and said, "I don't have a mother anymore. She stopped being one the day she left my child in the cold." I walked away. 3 years have passed. Amelia is 11 now. Taller, stronger, happier. She rides that bike every afternoon. Our small house has become a place of laughter and safety. I was promoted at work. We're stable. We're healing. I haven't spoken to my parents since the trial. And I never will. Because family isn't about blood. It's about who protects you when it matters most. And that terrible birthday? It wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of a better one.